Welcome to the Soul Mafia Love Stories. The channel will bring you stories of strong bonds, cultural differences, passionate love, and unforgettable dramatic events. If you love interracial love stories and cinematic storytelling, then this is the place for you. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. I exposed a mafia betrayal during Sunday service, inside a church, and I should have died that same day. The first time I stepped into that building, I believed it was the safest place in Baltimore. Warm lights, soft hymns, people who smiled like they had nothing to hide. I was just a night school teacher trying to help, translating immigration documents for Korean families who trusted the church more than the system. That was my role. Quiet, useful, invisible. And then I was sent downstairs. They told me it was urgent. Papers that needed translation before morning. I remember gripping the folder, walking past the last row of pews, pushing open the heavy door that led to the basement. The air changed immediately. Colder. Thicker. Like the walls were holding their breath. Halfway down the stairs, I heard voices. Not prayers. Not whispers. Sharp. Controlled. Dangerous. Korean words I understood too well. Shipment. Loyalty. Tonight. I should have turned around. I did not. I took one more step, then another, until I could see through the narrow gap of the basement door. 3 men stood under harsh fluorescent lights. One of them was Cha Moo-jin. I knew his face from the community. The quiet donor. The man who always sat in the second row, head slightly bowed during sermons. He did not look quiet now. His voice was low, but it cut through the room like a blade. Across from him stood another man, younger, eyes burning with something that felt like hunger. Kong Jun, his so-called brother. His posture was wrong. Too tense. Too ready. And then I understood. This was not a meeting. This was a fracture. My fingers tightened around my phone without me realizing. I leaned closer, trying to catch every word. Betrayal. Money. Blood. My pulse started pounding in my ears. I told myself to leave. I told myself this was not my business. But then Moo-jin said something that froze me in place. He trusted him. Completely. And Kong Jun smiled. That was when my phone slipped. The sound was small. Barely a tap against concrete. But in that room, it might as well have been a gunshot. Every head snapped toward the door. My body locked. My breath disappeared. For a second, there was silence. Then footsteps. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. The door opened. I found myself staring straight into Cha Moo-jin's eyes. No anger. No panic. Just recognition. Like he had already decided something about me. Kong Jun moved behind him, faster, sharper, his hand already reaching inside his coat. I knew what was coming. I knew how stories like this ended. Wrong place. Wrong time. Witnesses do not walk away. I braced for the shot. But it never came. Moo-jin lifted his hand slightly, stopping everything. His gaze never left mine. In that moment, I realized something far worse than death. He was thinking, calculating, choosing, and somehow, I had just become part of that decision. He did not pull the trigger. And that scared me more than if he did. I expected to die in that basement, but instead, I was told to sit down. That was the moment everything inside me shifted from panic to something colder, sharper, harder to name. Moo-jin did not raise his voice. He did not threaten me. He simply looked at me as if I had already crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Kong Jun, on the other hand, did not hide what he felt. Suspicion burned across his face, raw and immediate, like he was already deciding how quickly I needed to disappear. I could feel it in the way his fingers hovered near his coat, restless, impatient. If Moo-jin had not been standing between us, I know I would not have made it past that room. They took my phone. They took the folder. They took the illusion that I could walk back upstairs and pretend none of this existed. I remember trying to speak, my voice catching somewhere in my throat, explaining that I was just there to translate, that I did not see anything, that I would not say a word. It sounded weak even to me. Kong Jun let out a quiet laugh, low and mocking, like he had heard the same lie too many times. Moo-jin did not laugh. He studied me instead, slow and deliberate, as if he was peeling back layers I did not even know I had. Then he asked me a question that made no sense in that moment. He asked if I understood everything I had just heard. I nodded before I could stop myself. That was my mistake. Something changed in his eyes, subtle but final. If I understood, then I was no longer just a bystander. I was a variable. A risk. Or a tool. He turned slightly, speaking in Korean to the men behind him, his tone calm but absolute. I caught fragments. She stays. Not yet. Useful. Kong Jun did not like that. I could see it in the tightness of his jaw, the way his shoulders stiffened like a coiled spring. He stepped forward, his voice sharper now, questioning, pushing, almost daring Mu Jin to reconsider. I did not need to understand every word to feel the tension crackling between them. This was not just about me. This was something deeper. Something already broken. Mu Jin cut him off with a single look. It was enough. And just like that, my fate was decided without my consent. They moved me to a smaller room deeper in the basement, one with no windows and a single metal table. The air smelled faintly of bleach and something older, something metallic that I did not want to identify. I sat there for what felt like hours, my hands trembling in my lap, trying to steady my breathing. Every sound above me felt amplified. Footsteps. Doors. Voices. Life continuing as if nothing underneath had shifted into something violent and irreversible. A church above. A war below. I kept thinking about the people upstairs lighting candles, whispering prayers, believing they were safe. If they only knew what was happening beneath their feet, would they still call this place holy? The door opened without warning. Mu Jin stepped inside alone. No guards. No weapons in his hands. Just that same controlled presence that made the room feel smaller the moment he entered. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, close enough that I could see the faint scar along his jaw, the kind that does not come from accidents. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uneven, filling the silence between us. Then he asked me to translate something. A document. Routine. Ordinary. As if we were not sitting in the aftermath of something that could have ended my life. I stared at him, confused. He did not repeat himself. So I did it. Line by line, word by word, I translated. My voice was unsteady at first, but it found a rhythm, something familiar to hold on to. It felt almost absurd, the normalcy of it. Language bridging worlds, even this one. When I finished, he nodded once, like I had just completed a task in a classroom instead of under the shadow of a gun I had not seen but could still feel. Then he asked another question. This one was quieter, more personal. He asked why I volunteered here. I swallowed hard before answering. I told him the truth, that I believed people deserved help. That language should not be a barrier to survival. That the church felt like the one place where people could start over without fear. He held my gaze for a long second. Then he said something I did not expect. He said he used to believe that too. The words landed heavier than any threat. For a brief moment, I saw something crack beneath the surface. Not weakness. Not regret. Something more complicated. Something buried. He told me he grew up in this building. That he learned his first English words in the same rooms where deals were now being made. That the same people who taught him how to pray also taught him how to survive when prayer stopped working. There was no pride in his voice. No apology either. Just a quiet statement of fact, like he had already made peace with what he had become. I did not know what to say. So I asked the only thing that felt real. If you still believe in God, I said, why are you doing this here? The question hung between us, fragile and dangerous. For the first time, Mu Jin looked away. Just for a second. Then he stood up, pushing the chair back with a soft scrape against the floor. He did not answer me. He did not need to. The silence said enough. Whatever belief he had once carried was no longer clean. It had been reshaped into something that could coexist with violence, with control, with choices that did not leave room for innocence. Before he left, he paused at the door. He told me I would stay for now. That as long as I was useful, I was alive. It was not a threat. It was a condition. Clear. Final. Unavoidable. And then he was gone. The door closed behind him, the sound echoing louder than it should have. I sat there, trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand the logic of a man who could spare a life and still feel like the most dangerous person in the room. But it was not just him that unsettled me. It was Kong Jun. The way he had looked at Mu Jin. The way he had pushed, challenged, resisted. That was not loyalty. That was something else. Something waiting. Later that night, when they brought in another set of documents, I overheard just enough to piece it together. A shipment. A transfer of power. A meeting scheduled soon. And buried inside those conversations, hidden beneath coded language and careful phrasing, was a truth that made my stomach drop. Kong Jun was planning something. Not a disagreement. Not a negotiation. A betrayal. And Mu Jin did not see it coming. I sat there, the weight of that realization pressing down on me, heavier than fear itself. Because now I understood something even worse than being trapped. I was standing at the edge of a moment that was about to break everything apart. And somehow, without choosing it, without wanting it, I had become the only person in that building who could see it before it happened. The question was not whether I would survive. The question was whether I would stay silent and live with it, or speak and risk becoming the next body buried beneath that church. I told myself to stay quiet. That was the smartest choice. The safest one. People like me were not built for wars like this. I was a teacher. I corrected essays. I reminded students to meet deadlines. I believed problems could be solved with patience and words. But the truth sitting in my chest that night refused to stay still. Kong Jun was going to kill Mujin, and I was the only person who knew it. If I stayed silent, I would walk away alive. If I spoke, I might not walk away at all. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. What kind of person survives by saying nothing? By the time they brought me back into the main room, I had already made the decision I would regret. Mujin stood at the table, reviewing documents, his expression unreadable as always. Kong Jun was there too, leaning casually against the wall, but nothing about him felt relaxed. His eyes flicked toward me the moment I entered, sharp and measuring, like he was still waiting for me to make a mistake. The room felt tighter than before, heavier, like something invisible was already closing in. I did not plan it well. That is the truth. I thought I could find a moment alone with Mujin, say just enough to warn him, then step back before anyone noticed. I thought I could control the timing. I was wrong. The words came out too fast. You cannot trust him. The moment they left my mouth, I knew I had just crossed a line I could not step back from. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Mujin's head tilted slightly, his attention shifting to me, not alarmed, not surprised, just focused. Kong Jun did not move at first. Then slowly, he pushed himself off the wall, his expression flattening into something cold and deliberate. What did you just say? His voice was quiet, but it carried weight, the kind that made the air feel thinner. I tried to recover, to soften it, to pretend I had meant something else, but it was too late. The room had already shifted. Mujin looked between us, his gaze sharpening as he picked up on what I had failed to hide. Suspicion. Not just directed at me, but at something deeper that had been sitting beneath the surface long before I walked into that basement. Kong Jun laughed, but there was no humor in it. She is scared, he said, stepping closer. She does not understand what she heard. I should have stayed quiet then. I should have let him rewrite the moment. But something inside me refused to back down. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the memory of Mujin saying he used to believe in something better. I met his eyes and spoke again, slower this time, steady. He is lying to you. That was it. Everything snapped. Kong Jun moved first. Faster than I expected. His hand came out of his coat, and this time there was no hesitation. The gun was real. Cold. Final. It pointed directly at me, then shifted slightly, just enough to include Mujin in its line. The message was clear. I was not the only target anymore. You should not have said that, he muttered. The room exploded into motion. Chairs scraped. Someone shouted. I froze for half a second, my body refusing to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Mujin did not freeze. He stepped forward just enough to break the line between me and the gun, his movements precise, controlled, like he had been expecting something like this all along but not this soon. Kong Jun's expression twisted, something raw finally breaking through the calm he had been pretending to hold. Did you really think I would stay under you forever? The words came out like a confession and a challenge at the same time. Everything hidden was suddenly exposed. The loyalty. The brotherhood. It had all been an act. Or maybe it had been real once and rotted into something else. I did not know which was worse. The first shot rang out before I could process the rest. It was louder than anything I had ever heard inside those walls. The sound tore through the basement, through the church above, through whatever illusion of safety still existed in my mind. I flinched hard, my ears ringing, my vision blurring for a split second. When it cleared, Mujin had already moved again. He grabbed the edge of the table, flipping it just enough to create cover, pulling me down with him as another shot cracked through the air. Stay down, he said, his voice low but firm. I hit the floor hard, the impact knocking the breath out of me. The concrete was cold against my palms. I could smell gunpowder now, sharp and suffocating. Around us, everything had turned into chaos. Men shouting. Feet scrambling. Another shot. Then another. This was no longer a confrontation. It was a battlefield. I pressed myself against the side of the table, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. I had never been this close to violence before. Not like this. Not where every second mattered. Not where one wrong movement could mean the end of everything. I wanted to close my eyes. I wanted to disappear. But I could not, because I had caused this. Through the noise, I caught a glimpse of Kong Jun moving toward the back exit, his expression no longer controlled but burning with something close to fury. This had not gone the way he planned. Not clean. Not quiet. He had been forced into the open, and now there was no going back. Another shot. Mu Jin jerked slightly beside me. For a second, I thought he had missed. Then I saw it. The dark stain spreading through his shirt, slow at first, then faster. Blood. Real. Immediate. My stomach dropped. You are hit, I whispered, my voice barely there. He did not respond right away. His jaw tightened, his breathing shifting just enough to tell me how bad it was. But he stayed upright. He stayed focused. Even now, even bleeding, he was still thinking ahead. Kong Jun disappeared through the back door. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had started. Silence rushed back in, thick and disorienting. The kind that made everything feel unreal for a moment, like the world had paused to catch its breath. My ears were still ringing, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I stared at the space where Kong Jun had been. It was over. Or at least, that part of it was. Mu Jin reached out, grabbing my arm, pulling me closer into the shadow behind the overturned table. His grip was strong despite the blood, despite everything. When I looked at him, really looked this time, I saw something different in his eyes. Not just calculation. Not just control. Something darker. Something final. Now you are not just a witness, he said quietly. His voice did not rise, but the weight of it settled deep in my chest. You are part of this war. And just like that, there was no going back. I stopped thinking about escape the moment I realized there was nowhere to run. That was the shift. Clean. Final. Survival was no longer about distance. It was about control. Kong Jun had failed to finish what he started, but failure like that does not disappear. It evolves. It sharpens. It comes back smarter. And now he knew two things that made everything worse. Mu Jin was wounded. And I existed. We moved fast after the shooting. Not chaos this time. Precision. The kind that comes from people who have done this before. Mu Jin refused help at first, but the blood said otherwise. I pressed cloth against the wound, while someone locked down the basement entrances. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to steady. Pressure. Hold. Do not think about how warm the blood felt, or how easily it kept coming. He did not flinch. That scared me more than the injury itself. You should have stayed silent, he said quietly, not accusing, just stating a fact. I met his eyes and held them. If I did, you would be dead. Something flickered across his face. Not gratitude. Not quite. Recognition, maybe. Then it was gone. They patched him up enough to move. Not enough to rest. That told me everything about the situation we were in. This was not over. This was the beginning of something worse. I stayed close because no one told me to leave, and more importantly, because I knew leaving would not save me anymore. Kong Jun would not forget my face. My voice. The moment I exposed him. That kind of mistake does not get forgiven. Hours passed in fragments. Phone calls in low voices. Names I did not recognize. Locations that sounded like code. Every piece of it layered into something bigger than I understood. But one truth sat at the center of all of it. Kong Jun was not running. He was repositioning. That was when I noticed the cameras. They were everywhere. Small. Discreet. Mounted in corners most people would never look at twice. At first, I thought they were just for security. Then I saw the monitor feed in a side room. Every angle of the church. Every hallway. Every entrance. Even parts of the basement. It was not just protection. It was documentation. What if they saw everything? The thought hit me so hard I almost said it out loud. Instead, I walked closer to the screens, scanning through the footage, my mind racing faster than my fear. The deal. The confrontation. The shooting. If it was recorded, then this was not just a hidden war anymore. It was evidence. Mu Jin stepped in behind me, silent as ever. You are thinking too loudly, he said. I pointed at the monitors. If this system records everything, then you do not need to chase Kong Jun. You can expose him. He did not respond immediately. His eyes moved across the screens, calculating, measuring. I could almost see the shift happening in real time. Not emotion. Strategy. He had been thinking in terms of retaliation. I was thinking in terms of revelation. This is a church, I continued, my voice steadier now. People trust this place. They will believe what they see here more than anything you say. He turned to me slowly. And what happens to you when this is shown? The question landed hard. Because I knew the answer. I do not walk away clean, I said. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of that truth settled between us. This was not a plan that saved me. It was a plan that burned everything down. Including me. Kong Jun had already compromised the system, Mu Jin said finally. He controls parts of the network. Then we do not use his system, I replied. We use it against him. That was when the idea fully formed. Sunday service. The largest gathering. The most witnesses. The least expected moment for something like this to happen. Not a hidden confrontation in a basement. A public exposure. In the one place Kong Jun believed he still had control. Mu Jin studied me again longer this time. Not as a liability. Not just as a tool. Something else was changing. Something dangerous in a different way. You are not afraid of consequences, he said. I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding. I am terrified. But that has not helped me so far. A faint, almost invisible shift at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Something colder. Good. The plan came together piece by piece. We mapped the camera feeds that were still clean. Identified which ones Kong Jun could not access remotely. Found the central control panel hidden behind a locked cabinet most volunteers probably thought was just storage. Every step carried risk. Every adjustment felt like walking a line that could snap at any moment. But for the first time since I walked into that basement, I was not reacting. I was choosing. That changed everything. We would let Kong Jun believe he still had the upper hand. Let him move forward with whatever final deal he was planning. Let him walk into the church on Sunday expecting control, expecting silence, expecting loyalty that no longer existed. And then we would take that away from him in front of everyone who trusted those walls. Faith as a weapon. It sounded wrong even in my head. But so did everything else that had happened here. As the night stretched into morning, exhaustion tried to pull me under, but my mind refused to slow down. I kept replaying the plan, every step, every possible failure. What if the feed cut out? What if Kong Jun realized too soon? What if the people upstairs panicked in a way we could not control? There were too many variables. Too many ways for this to collapse. And still it felt like the only path forward. By the time Sunday approached, the church looked exactly the same as it always had. Clean. Quiet. Welcoming. People would walk in with their burdens, their prayers, their belief that something sacred waited for them inside. They would not know what was about to unfold beneath their feet, what truth was about to be dragged into the light in the middle of their sanctuary. I stood near the control panel, the small remote cold in my hand. Mu Jin was somewhere in the shadows, recovering just enough to stand, to watch, to wait. We had not spoken much since the plan was set. There was nothing left to say that would change what was about to happen. If I press this, I thought, no one walks out clean. My thumb hovered over the button, my heart pounding in my chest, louder than the distant sound of the congregation gathering above. And for the first time since all of this began, I understood something clearly. This was not about survival anymore. This was about truth. And truth, once exposed, does not ask for permission. Sunday service began like nothing had happened. That was the most disturbing part. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting soft colors across polished wooden pews. People filled the room slowly, greeting each other with quiet warmth, hands clasped, heads bowed. I stood at the edge of it all, invisible again, just another volunteer blending into the background. If anyone looked at me, they saw a teacher, not a witness, not someone about to fracture everything they believed in. The choir started singing, voices rising, steady and pure. For a moment, I almost forgot what waited beneath their feet. Almost. Kong Jun arrived 10 minutes into the service. He moved like he owned the space. Calm, composed, untouchable. If there was any trace of what happened in the basement, he buried it well. He even bowed his head during prayer, hands folded, the perfect image of devotion. If I had not seen the gun in his hand, the betrayal in his eyes, I might have believed it too. That was the power of this place. It made monsters look human. I felt the remote in my palm, small and heavy at the same time. Mu Jin stood near the back, partially hidden, his posture rigid but controlled. He should not have been standing at all, not after the blood he lost, but he was here anyway. Watching. Waiting. Not for revenge. For truth. That difference mattered more than I expected. The pastor's voice echoed gently through the room, speaking about forgiveness, about faith, about the idea that light always finds its way into darkness. I almost laughed, not because it was wrong, but because of how it was about to be tested. My pulse started to climb, each second stretching longer than it should. This was the moment, the point of no return. My thumb pressed down. At first, nothing happened. Then the screens came alive. The projector behind the altar flickered, and the soft hymn was cut by a sharp shift in sound. Confusion rippled through the congregation as the image changed. No scripture. No sermon notes. Just raw footage. Grainy at first, then clearer. The basement. The table. The faces. Mu-jin. Kong-jun. Voices rising. Words no one expected to hear inside a church. Betrayal. Money. Blood. Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped a book. Another person stood up too quickly, knocking into the pew. The illusion shattered in real time. There was no denying it. No explaining it away. The truth did not ask for permission. It forced itself into the open, loud and undeniable. Kong-jun's head snapped toward the screen, the first crack in his control finally visible. For a split second, he froze. Then the mask broke completely. He turned. Too late. Security moved in from the sides, not church volunteers this time, but people who had been waiting for this exact moment. The doors were already sealed. There was nowhere clean left to run. Kong-jun tried anyway, his movements sharp, desperate, but the space that once protected him now held him in place. Hands grabbed him, forced him down, the same ground he thought he controlled. The room erupted into chaos. People shouting, crying, praying louder as if it could undo what they had just seen. Faith cracking under the weight of reality. I stood there, my chest tight, my hands still, watching everything unfold like I was outside my own body. This was what truth looked like. Not clean, not righteous, just real. And then I looked at Mu-jin. He did not run. He did not hide. He stepped forward instead into the open, into the same light that exposed Kong-jun. Not innocent. Not redeemed. Just present. Accepting whatever came next. For the first time, he did not look like a man controlling the room. He looked like someone who had stopped running from it. Our eyes met across the chaos. There was no victory in that moment. No relief. Just something quieter. Something unfinished. Whatever existed between us did not belong in a place like this, and yet it had been forged here anyway, in blood and truth and choices that could not be undone. I turned away first. I walked toward the exit as voices rose behind me, as sirens began to echo in the distance, as the church I once trusted collapsed into something else entirely. I did not look back. I walked into that church believing it was holy. I walked out knowing even God watches in silence sometimes. I thought exposing the truth would feel like justice. Clean. Final. But walking away from that church, I realized something heavier. Truth does not fix what is broken. It only reveals how deep the damage runs. Kong-jun was taken down. Mu-jin chose to face what he built. And me. I lost the illusion that good places stay good just because we believe in them. Maybe faith is not about safety. Maybe it is about what you choose to do when everything sacred turns dark. So tell me, if you were standing where I stood, would you press that button? Or would you walk away and pretend you never saw anything? If this story pulled you in, do not forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one.